What is it about New York City mayors and their delusions of grandeur? This time on Poll Hub, they want to be governor, they want to be president, and it never seems to work out. So is it going to be different for former Mayor Mike Bloomberg? We'll take a look. But if voters just aren't into ex-Big Apple mayors, it doesn't mean they aren't into anyone. Enthusiasm heading into 2020 is pretty incredible, but not as high as you might think if you spend all your nights watching cable news. We're going to explain, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
So is it a Mike Bloomberger nothing burger? I almost got that right.
Yes.
These mayors, they want to run, and Mike Bloomberg may be running, but...
Okay.
Excuse me, but I got to throw my 2 cents in here. The impossible Bloomberger.
Or the impossible dream. Okay, so let's get to the chase right here. Okay, so if you're mayor of New York City, it's like really hard to get promoted, even former mayors. In fact, my understanding is that in 1868, John Hoffman, mayor of New York City, was elected New York State governor, and that's it.
That's it.
That's the only promotion. So. I know, Jay, you covered Michael Bloomberg as mayor in New York City for practically his whole term, or most of it, I guess.
Most of it, yep.
So what's going on before we talk about the chances and the odds, what's going on here?
So I covered Rudy, and then I covered his presidential race,
Yes.
right? And Ed Koch had delusions of grandeur going up, to Albany. I'm not sure why he wanted to go to Albany, but he did. This is the biggest guy on the biggest stage, arguably, in the world until Donald Trump came along. This, the mayor of New York gets an inordinate amount of attention. How many people in the U.S. could name the mayor of L.A. or Chicago or San Francisco or Dallas or Houston? But almost everybody can name the mayor of New York. And so I think it gets into their heads that, hey, if I can do it here, I can do it anywhere.
I think there's
So the song goes.
Do you want to sing that?
No, I don't.
No. And so I think that's part of what it is. But I also think that history is not on anybody's side. I also think in this case, I think that Michael Bloomberg is not running for president.
So
he is a data-based guy. He lives in data, in the data, and he does his own polling. He's got very smart political people that are still on his team and his foundation. They got
to be saying to him that Democrats, although they haven't necessarily picked sides, they're fairly satisfied with the field. And I think if there's any urge, it's on the part of Democrats, is to narrow the field right now, not to re-widen it. I think Democrats are kind of happy. Some folks are dropping out. It's getting a little more, focused, and the debates are getting a little more, fewer folks at the podium. And so I think it's hard now to suddenly show up, particularly if you're going to self-finance when everybody's talking about raising in so many donors. To get into the debates alone, you have to have independent donors. Would he have that? I don't know.
Well, I don't know if, yes, Democrats certainly aren't looking forward to having more candidates in the race. So, they've had a couple of dozen for most of the year this year, and certainly more speculating. But I think there is a sense that there isn't a moderate or kind of middle-of-the-road Democrat that's running right now that has a good chance of beating Donald Trump. But I think there's a sense that, he may not be able to go the distance. And
then you got Mike Buttigieg. He's also in the middle. He's right now doing well in some...
Pete. You said Mike.
Mike.
Pete.
Oh, now
That's okay.
You're confusing me entirely. But he's now, claiming the middle. And so
I think
another one.
The warning sign for Bloomberg is a poll we did in 2019, and others have done the same. His favorable and unfavorables are even at 27% each among Democrats. Nobody else is anywhere near that in terms of the field. Nobody else has even unfavorable. A lot of people don't know who some of these candidates are, although this was back in January. I think that's a really tough place for him to be. And this Democratic primary is showing, if anything, the Democratic primary electorate is not looking for a centrist, and maybe they should be, but the primary electorate is revved up about non-centrists, and I understand, where's the centrist in the lane, because you may need that person.
I'm going to ask a question but
I do think that Buttigieg and Biden both have shown, in recent days, that there is a lane that's active, and it's still early. It's still early. Rudy Giuliani in 2008 was leading in the polls at this time. We never got a President Giuliani.
We may right now. I mean, he seems like, no, I'm
we
just
never
kidding.
even got a guy who won a primary. He didn't win a single primary. So I know it's later.
I'm
but
going to
it's
ask you a
still
question.
early.
I know, Barb, I'm going to ask you a question. I know your answer. So this is like in class, sometimes you ask questions and you get answers that you know about. But I'm going to ask you a question. Michael Bloomberg is saying, or the people around him are intimating that he will skip Iowa, he will skip New Hampshire, and he'll show up for Super Tuesday.
Yeah, we've heard
Good
that
idea,
before.
bad idea. I know the answer.
We've heard that before. In fact, what's really funny is that was Rudy Giuliani's strategy.
Except he did go in the early primaries. That was late when he wasn't doing well.
But he decided to go into the early primaries after he had pretty much constructed a campaign strategy to not go into the early primaries, and the last thing you can do is go into Iowa late. I mean, that doesn't work at all. And Iowa always does create some kind of a bounce for New Hampshire. It's not necessarily that New Hampshire voters, take their stride from Iowa, but the fact that it becomes a whole media circus, and I don't think you can avoid the attention that folks who come out of Iowa with at least a lot of attention do get. But that's tough.
Of its own,
that's really tough. There's a very short primary window this time too. Probably inside of a month, we've got. I think it's about half of the states will have already had their primaries. So it's going to be a sprint from Iowa to Super Tuesday, and you need the ground game to do that. But I had another question, which is with regard to Bloomberg, how much the fact that Trump is president factors into his decision or his thought that he can do this.
Yeah, because Trump wasn't.
They know each other quite well, and I'm sure came to fisticuffs on a number of issues in New York City.
Yeah, but Steyer's in the race too, another rich guy who thinks that being rich is enough to qualify. I think Trump is the outlier in so many ways, including in this, and I don't think there's. Maybe I don't think that's why Bloomberg is suggesting that he might want to get in. I think he's covering his bases so that if everything fell apart and they needed somebody to come to as a centrist, he's in a position to be there. But I just don't see it as a credible argument to make right now.
So not closing doors, but really not opening any.
Yeah,
I think he would like to be president. He's also 77, and we know that there's a lot of older folks who are running or.
I'd like to be
running.
President too, Lee.
Yeah,
but,
I was about to say there's a lot of people who would like to be president, but running for president
you got to do it. That sort of is the advanced step on that.
Oh, that democracy thing.
But look you talked about New York City mayors. Okay,
right.
And we're going to move on in a sec. But so we've had this year alone. De Blasio's on the center stage. Giuliani's on the center stage. Bloomberg's trying to get a piece of the stage. I mean, poor David Dinkins. Where is the man? Maybe he should run for something.
It's probably just as well that a few of our ex-mayors decide that maybe they can lay low. But this enthusiasm that does not help former mayors of New York.
Sure.
There does not seem to be enough enthusiasm for them to get them through the primaries and onto the ticket. This enthusiasm this year, if it's not for de Blasio, it's not for Bloomberg. It is there. New Gallup poll has new numbers. 64% of Americans are more enthusiastic about voting in 2020 compared with previous elections. 28% are less enthusiastic. I think that's a little bit of a red flag sign there, because I think if you kind of are paying attention to politics and the political climate, you would think that enthusiasm would be like 99% are more enthusiastic than in the past. So that more than a quarter that are less enthusiastic, that seems to me to be kind of the big number in here.
Yeah, well, maybe people who have tuned out. But certainly, Gallup has been doing this since 2000. And what they are finding is that this is the highest enthusiasm numbers that they've seen in that time, this far out from an election. That 64% is something you usually find close to an election, right around Election Day. And when we're doing polling, we often do look at enthusiasm to get a sense of turnout.
And also which party seems to have the leg up And what's interesting in the Gallup numbers is very often the party out of power is the one that's, getting the enthusiasm because it's sort of a throw the bums out mentality. But in the current polls, and reflecting, I guess, the real polarization and the partisanship that's out there right now, is Democrats and Republicans are sort of equally enthusiastic.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
65% to 66%.
Yeah, I'm not sure enthusiasm is the right word, though. I mean, I think some of this is motivated not because, you're eager to get in there, but there may be some negative motivations here because you may want to get the other guy out.
Well, I don't think they're trying to measure motivation, but we've always looked at this, and it doesn't necessarily tell you who is going to win. Because even if one side is more motivated or enthusiastic than the other side, what we find, particularly in 2012, and the Gallup numbers actually bear this out, the Republicans were very enthusiastic in 2012. They very much wanted to defeat President Obama and not allow him
another example of the party
term.
Out of power, their voters being really, eager to get into it.
And Democrats were not very enthusiastic. In fact, I think in the Gallup numbers, the enthusiasm numbers around Election Day were actually, or going in a couple months before Election Day, were actually under 50%. What we have found in some of our polling is that, yes, enthusiasm can give you a sense of, who's really motivated, but it doesn't necessarily tell you who's going to end up voting. Because
what the turnout's really going to be. Yeah.
Exactly. Because
or who's necessary. I mean, a lot of people misread that enthusiasm in 2012 and thought that Mitt Romney was well on his way because
including Mitt Romney,
Mitt Romney and his supporters, and there was a sense.
If you recall, I don't think he had a concession speech that night.
Yeah, that's true. Although sometimes people don't like to jinx themselves anyway. But I think we've also been seeing higher turnout. 2018. The midterm elections was, off the charts, particularly among younger people, was a really surge among that group. And I know in the recent election for governor in Kentucky just a couple weeks ago, there was a huge increase in the turnout over 4 years ago for the same office. Yeah, I think we're seeing this kind of like interest in politics and with people thinking a lot more is at stake because there's my side and there's the other side.
Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
That can, get people involved.
Looking at the chart from 2001, it's hard to visualize in a podcast, so just close your eyes and follow along with me. The red line is the Republican enthusiasm. The blue line is Democratic enthusiasm. And over all of these years, there's always been a gap. The gaps have switched. The lines have crossed, but there's always a gap. And starting in 2016, the lines go in the same direction and close. So there was a lower Democratic enthusiasm at the time of the 2016 election by about 8 points, 51-43. Mm-hmm. And both lines have gone up to 66-65. Republicans are more enthusiastic. What's interesting to me about that is what happened between 2016 and where we sit today. The 2018 elections, which were seen as a blue wave. At that time, Republicans were saying to pollsters that a higher enthusiasm slightly than Democrats, but it was a blue wave election. So I think that reinforces the point that this is interesting, but it is not dispositive towards telling us what's going to happen in the election, who's going to show up in the election, and we are a year out. But
that is why. That's why it is. But that's why it's such an eye opener.
I know, but I still am surprised that 28% say even right now that they're less enthusiastic about voting. Is that the discouraged? We've talked about people who are just like, I don't care anymore. Just shut up. I'm sick of this, and they're tuning out. Is that?
Well, I think
what these people are?
I think that there has been for a very long time a disconnect, and we've seen this. People have told us this in our interviews that they don't really see how government impacts their lives, and they feel that there is a disconnect not only between themselves and sometimes their state officials, but a very large, wide gap between people and Washington. And that doesn't come as any surprise. We've had big wave elections back and forth precisely because people feel that Washington is broken. But I also think that this far out of an election to have this many people engaged is quite phenomenal.
It's a
and
good point.
We're reaching the point where we've had a decline in voting for a very, very long time, and these last few cycles have actually shown a significant reversal of that trend. And so,
is that Donald Trump's greatest legacy? Maybe.
I
may be
think
being
it was,
formed right now.
I think it was happening, but to be serious about that, I think it's actually was happening before Donald
Yes,
Trump.
I do. I agree.
I think he tapped into something that was already a trend and a pattern that was already going on, that people were taking another look at Washington and at politics and government and making more of a connection between their vote and how we could make change.
Interesting that the trust in government numbers, the confidence in government or other institutions are not recovering right now. But now there's a sense, you've got, some people feel they've got their guy, and some people think there's the other side, and both teams are really rooting for their team right now. And I think we're seeing rooting going on here.
Both teams feel it matters.
It matters.
And so I think that's the really big difference. And yes, 28% being disconnected, but that's the lowest it's been in a very, very long time. And we're a year out.
Yeah. So that they may get turned on or turned off more. We'll see. It is something that the next year will tell us all about.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College here in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our editor. Want to also remind you that we have a thing called the Poll Hub Academy. You want to learn about polling, you want to know more about polling, like why questions are the way they are, why people use internet polls, but other people use phone polls. It's all there, and best of all, it's free. So check it out. academy.maristpoll.marist.edu. We'll put it in the show notes.
And we always thank the Roper Center, which archives a lot of polls and gives us a chance to look at some of the numbers over time. This week is an exciting week for the Roper Center because not only do we have our annual board meeting, I'm a trustee of the organization, but we are going down to New York City with a group of student class that Mary Griffith and I co-teach, and they're going to attend a seminar panel presentation by experts on the census. We've talked a lot in here about the census, and now we're going to be joined with lots of experts in their view, and the students are going to participate and hear that. And then we go over to the Roper-Matovsky dinner, which will be an award dinner, which is the annual dinner fundraiser, but also a chance to give some recognition to people who do good work in the field of public opinion research. So big week for the Roper Center.
Yes, and we always do enjoy the dinner and catching up with colleagues there as well. But we'd like to catch up with you too, so reach out to us on social media. We are at Marist Poll on Twitter or Marist Poll on Facebook. And please, don't forget to subscribe.
Say bye, Jay.
Bye, Jay.